I'm Julie Gosher, and I'm the director of the Lyme Heritage Center. And as you know, we always have fantastic programs all summer long. And our first program this year, we're very fortunate to have Louis Pagnotti, is that how you pronounce
exactly.
it?
Thank you.
He's a little bit nervous, but I promised him, I promised him you were all friendly. So,
Well, most of us.
this is, I think, a new experience for you.
Sure, definitely.
Yes. And he has a fishing charter
Yeah.
business, but he's also very, very interested in the history of our area, particularly the fishing and waterfront history of our area. So his program is going to be informal. He'll probably talk about some history of the fishing and stuff and where he lives, and something also about the fish in the area. And afterwards, you're welcome to ask him questions or give him information.
Yes.
And naturally, you're all welcome to come in the research room and poke around, ask questions, look at pictures, whatever. So, with that said, I'll turn the program over to Louis.
Thank you. All right, so I'll basically be speaking about the history of Chaumont, the bay itself, the history of the man that was Chaumont and his son. There were indeed two Chaumonts, so we'll refer to Chaumont Sr. as the father and Junior, who came to Northern New York as Chaumont Jr., just to clear that up in the beginning. But this is a picture right here of the Chateau Chaumont. Now, Chaumont is actually the name of the town that this castle is in. Chaumont's name was Jacques Donatan de Leray de Chaumont. Chaumont was just a way to kind of not mix and match people from where they were from. So Chaumont is actually where he was from and not actually his name. So this is the Chateau Chaumont, and it's in France, in the Loire River Valley. It was formerly owned by Catherine Medici of the Medici family, who were very prominent people of their time. She had relatives who were popes. She became Queen of France herself. She also gave birth to three kings, Charles II, Henry III, and the third was Francis II. She was also intrigued by astronomy, and she had guests over to the chateau. This is before Chaumont had owned it himself, but her guests included Nostradamus, which is pretty interesting. But Chaumont is actually a French term meaning bald mount, because the chateau sits on the top of a mount overlooking the River Loire. And Chaumont Jr., who came to New York, was actually born there. Okay. So this is a picture of Chaumont Sr., and it was actually done by a sculptor that he employed named Jean-Baptiste Nenny. And he's known as the French father of the American Revolution. We would have probably found it impossible to win our independence without Chaumont and the things that he did for the country that was to be. He mainly made his fortune through shipping, and he was loyal to the American cause mainly because he believed in its ideals, especially in equality. He served under King Louis XVI on the court of Versailles, which was very much like the president's cabinet today. And we'll have more about the elder Chaumont to come, but we're going to go next to Ben Franklin. And if you want to know how close Franklin was to Chaumont, he was a house guest of Chaumont in France for 9 years. 1776 to 1785, he spent living in the town of Passy at an estate of Chaumont's, where Chaumont also lived, not full-time, but he had his chateau, which was in Chaumont. and then he had another estate in the town of Passy, right outside of Paris. And this is a very famous medallion that was also made by Jean-Baptiste Nani, who was a sculptor of Chaumot's. And it was wildly popular, much like Franklin was in Paris. He was just an iconic, wildly popular figure. And he insisted on wearing a hat that was kind of indicative of the trapping style of where, you know, the colonies would be. But this medallion was made in cast and I believe terracotta, but it was a pretty popular item going around France at the time. But yeah, spent 9 years.
That's crazy.
So he got to know Chaumont Jr. as well. And he actually impressed him so much that inspired Chaumont Jr., who came here to actually learn English and want to become an American citizen himself. So that was kind of a big backstory for Chaumont Jr. And now we go to Thomas Jefferson, who was also a very good friend of Chaumont and spent 4 years of his life living in France. Although he didn't live at Chaumot's estate in Passy, he lived at the Hotel Longnac, it was torn down, I believe, in 1842, but it was right on the Champs-Élysées, which is equivalent to our Fifth Avenue in New York City. And again, he was a close friend of Chaumot's, who spent 4 years in France himself. And now we'll go to John Paul Jones, who was a famous naval captain he was actually one of our first Navy captains, and Chaumont actually commissioned a ship. Chaumont made his money in shipping. He was a shipping magnate. And he actually refitted a merchant ship rather, into a warship. And it was commissioned by John Paul Jones, where the famous lines were uttered, I have not yet begun to fight. That was from the ship that he fitted for the Navy. And as a nod to Franklin, he named the ship the Bonhomme Richard, which in French means our good boy Richard, which was Ben Franklin's pseudonym or his pen name, Poor Richard's Almanac. So that was a little kind of secret nod to Franklin, which was kind of neat. And then he also made the only land invasion in England during the war. He actually attacked the town of Whitehaven, England, during the American Revolution. And it kind of sent the Brits a little bit crazy because they were thinking, oh, they're going to be coming at our front door, and kind of did a little bit to sway the feelings there. Maybe we should just let them go. We don't want them coming here, you know? So he made the only land invasion. It wasn't from the Bonhomme Richard, it was from another vessel named the Ranger. But in any regard, he actually did make landfall and caused a stir in the port city of Whitehaven. Okay, now this next pic you're probably a little bit familiar with. This would be Chaumont Jr. And Chaumont Jr., again, fell in love with the ideas of America via Franklin and was eager to become a citizen himself. So when the time came, the family bought a large tract of land in northern New York from all the way from Lewis County, much of it being shoreline on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence Seaway. So before he'd come over, he commissioned a group of men to come down across the pond, come down the St. Lawrence, and come into the Chaumont Bay, go up the Chaumont River, and make the first town or encampment, which was the village of Chaumont. And he was set to come the next year and kind of see how things were going. When he got there the next year, he found the town was stricken with riverborne diseases, malaria, typhoid, things like that. So he then moved the encampment out to the mouth of the Chaumont River and out towards Point Salubrious, which he named. And in French, salubrious equates to good health. He saw it as a windswept point. It kept the bugs off. And he joked that if you lived on Point Salubrious, you'd live to be 100 because you didn't have these riverborne diseases and things that you did down in the river where they had the original encampment. So also the towns of Cape Vincent was named after his son Vincent. Alexandria Bay was named after his son Alexandria. And the town of Theresa was named after his daughter. And then the town of Plessis is believed to be his dog. So that was pretty interesting. But needless to say, he did a tremendous amount of work here, and bringing Jefferson County, putting it on the map. But we'll get into the next photo here. The next photo is going to be General Brown. I'm sure you're all familiar with General Brown too. Right down the street we have Brownville, which was, I'm sure we all know, named after him. And he's also known as the father of Army recruitment. He actually worked for Chaumont as a land agent. And Chaumont, kind of using his reputation, he was in the military at the time, but he was colonel of a militia. And then Chaumont, using some of his persuasion, got him elevated to a general. And eventually, James Monroe appointed him as commander commander general of the whole United States Army. And upon his death in 1828, the government shut down for the day, and his body was taken down Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, with a mile-long procession. And it was, a big to-do. Like I said, he was given the rank of commanding general of the whole entire United States Army. And it wasn't a time of war. It was maybe a little bit, easier to do it then, but in any regard, he was the commanding general.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
the time frame, because Joseph Bonaparte was up here around that same.
yes, I'm
Are
gonna
you
get to
covering
him
that?
too, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I just did not be.
Yeah, so I'll get to that now. So Bonaparte and Chaumont were friends. Joseph
Okay.
Bonaparte was a brother of Napoleon. And actually, Chaumont came to sell about 25,000 acres of land to Joseph Bonaparte. And the biggest lake on this tract, Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon, and it was said that he came here to avoid any type of assassinations or anything like that. But in any regard, he named that big lake, Lake Diana, which we now know as Lake Bonaparte. But that was a tract of land, 25,000 acres, that Chaumont had sold him.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And then now here, this is a pretty bad scene for Louis XVI. So when Chaumont Chaumont and Franklin got together, they really couldn't back our revolution because they were afraid of revolutions of their own. So they couldn't get behind and say, okay, we're gonna lend you money. So they used Chaumont as a back channel. And this is Chaumont Sr. So essentially, Chaumont had, again, taking a liking to the American cause, believed in the ideals, and said, okay, I'm going to lend out of my private coffers and in vast amounts. And then when his money kind of dried up is when he petitioned Louis XVI and said, listen, he had invested interest, obviously, because he was pretty much loaned himself broke. And eventually convinced Louis XVI to loan out of the French coffers. Well, when the coffers ran dry, it was untimely because a famine struck in France. And what the government would normally do was they would subsidize the flours and the wheat and things like that to keep people fed. Well, when the money wasn't there to do that, that sparked the French Revolution, literally. So the overlending that they did kind of came back to bite them, because when the time came to do the subsidization, it wasn't there. They had faced an uprising of their own, and unfortunately, Louis XVI faced the guillotine. Now, Chaumont escaped unharmed, but he was imprisoned, and at news of his imprisonment, Chaumont Jr., who was in Switzerland at the time, rushed to France, to Paris, and verbally demanded his father's release, and even said some pretty bold things to the people, the powers that be at the time. But to my surprise, he was able to garner his father's release from French prison, which he was imprisoned as, the term they used was, it's almost like an immigrant, an émigré, and it was basically like a political exile. So Junior was able to come and kind of free Dad, although he lost his chateau. It was taken from him, but he ultimately escaped with his life. So this also paved the way for Napoleon. Now, fast forward 9 years after the revolution, now Napoleon was able to kind of take his reign, and as I mentioned before, he became friends with his brother Joseph and sold him that tract of land there that became Lake Bonaparte. Okay, so that's pretty much the history aspect that kind of brings us to here. There's obviously a lot more to it, but I just figured I'd hit on the finer points there. And we'll get to Chaumont Bay. And, you know, why is Chaumont Bay such a good fishery? What, you know, everyone knows, people rave about the fishing in Chaumont Bay. Well, in my opinion, there's a couple different factors. One, we have excellent shoals in Chaumont proper. So Chaumont proper would be kind of the land in between the tip of Point Salubrious and 3 Mile Point. That's just my own kind of verbiage for it. So in between those, relatively in between those two landmarks, you have Johnson Shoal, which actually is just an extension of Independence Point. So that's just a weathered down extension of where Independence Point used to protrude to. And then you have Middle Shoal, and then you of course have Herrick Shoal. So these 3 shoals make up some great environment for fish habitat, for bait. There's also a bunch of different bottom structures. We have weed, we have sand, we have... Chaumont is a synonymously muddy bay, and it wasn't until the invasive zebra mussels, I believe that came in sometime around the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, cleaned the bay up quite a bit. It's relatively still a lot muddier than the main lake and the St. Lawrence, but it used to be a lot muddier from what I gather. But these shoals and this different structure really is what lends to, in my opinion, the good fishing. So next, we'll go to the walleye. Let's see, that's me. Now, the walleye are kind of our seasonal residents to the bay. They really only show up in numbers. We do have a small, I guess you call it resident population of the walleye, but these big females and the majority of the population will only come into the bay when the bay is pretty much the coldest part of Lake Ontario. And it's like clockwork. And I'll have guys come to me and say, you know, in the summertime, Lou, I fished all week. We were trolling, we were jigging. We couldn't catch a walleye. I'm kind of like, well, yeah, they're not there really, you know. They really only make the pilgrimage to the bay once the bay becomes the coldest part of the lake. And that's typically getting into the later November-ish time period. So it's kind of like a seasonal fish. But we do have a great, in the summertime, we have a phenomenal bass fishery here. And just for some reference on that, the Bass Mastery Elite Series, that comes through, they do it out of Clayton the last couple of years. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that as well. But the Elite Series has been going on, I believe, since the 60s. And they broke the all-time record for the biggest one-day bag and the biggest weekly bag at their tournament 3 years ago in Clayton. And this isn't just for here, this is at all their locations. The very next year, they came back and broke both. So that's just a little nod to what we have for smallmouth fishery as well. And the smallmouth, unlike the walleye, they're a dormant winter species. So when we're fishing in the wintertime on the ice, we don't typically catch a lot of smallmouth because they do go dormant in the wintertime. The walleye and the perch are more active in the winter, but quite frankly, they put the feed bag on late fall, and then as the winter kind of comes on, the walleye really aren't that aggressive anymore. The perch will still be, but the walleye will be finicky. And you know, a lot of guys will say, oh, you know, they're in here, they're chasing the perch, or they're chasing this. It's really not the case. They really have to be tricked into biting, which is, you know, if you guys are familiar with the tip-up style of fishing. Tip-ups, not gonna say they don't ever catch walleye, but they don't do as well as jigging, strictly because they've already put the feed bag on. When we have our ice pack, it's typically coming into late January, early February when we get fishable ice. And they're just kind of through that period of feed bag. Now, these big females seek out the bay, in my opinion, again, just like a pregnant human would do. You don't want to be on the big lake when you have a big belly getting thrown around and you have little energy and the food sources are dwindling. So in my opinion, these big female walleye will come in the wintertime just as a place to mill around. They're not so much looking like they are in the fall for the feed bag. They're now in a state of mind where let's get through the winter, get our cues for, you know, when the day starts getting longer, the water starts coming into the bay, and then they get into that pre-spawn and spawning mode. But guys will come to me and say, yeah, you know, they're around the shoals chasing the perch, and I hardly ever, personally, I don't keep any walleye. I don't care how big it is, I always release everything that I personally catch, and I try to do my best to kind of impart that on my clients. But over the years, the fish that have been kept, which are literally probably in the 5 to 10 percentile, if that, when you open these big females up, there's nothing in them. Nothing in their stomachs, not even a minnow. So it just kind of goes to back, and that's where I kind of go back and get this data from, just experience. I don't believe that they're, you know, in that feedback state anymore. And then we use these kind of ice fishing meets the 21st century with this Garmin live scope. It's kind of like an all-seeing sonar, so you can actually read the fish's behavior while you're jigging that walleye. So very much with that tip up, there's that minnow hanging. The walleye will kind of just swim right on by it because they're not looking to feed. When you have maybe a spoon down there, and you're jigging that spoon and you kind of catch the walleye's eye, you know, make it curious, and then you kind of put it through its natural progression and put it in essentially in a position where it kind of wants to naturally strike out of. I won't go into all the data because it's somewhat proprietary, but you'll yield a lot better results if you could kind of jig these fish by hand and prey on that natural instinct and induce the bite that way. But they're a finicky fish, and it's trophy caliber. More often than not, when we catch these walleye, you can pull it right out of with any given fish. You can pull it out of the water and put it on your wall. We don't catch too many small ones. Over the last 2 years, we have seen more small fish, but in general, the rule of thumb in the winter, if you catch one, you've got yourself a trophy. And that pretty much goes to any fish in the bay. I mean, I like to also say our perch are in quantity, and then our walleye are in quality. So our perch, you know, typically range in the, you know, 6 to 8 inch variety, where, you know, our average walleye is probably 26 inches, you know, in that general area, maybe 24 to 26 inches. But that's kind of our winter fishery. You know, the bass kind of go dormant, the walleye and the perch get a little bit more active, and then come springtime, usually by about, by June, they're back gone out to the main lake, to the river, the walleye I'm speaking of. And then we won't see them again until the late fall. But we also know Chaumont Bay for its Cisco. And I think back in the day it was loosely called Cisco Bay by its residents, who were referred to as the Cisco Chasers. If you lived on the bay or pretty much anywhere close to it, you probably had some interest in the Ciscos. Well, unfortunately, they were overfished extremely, and they were put in barrels and shipped out almost to extinction. But in any regard, they have been making a comeback in recent years. The DEC's been doing multiple projects to kind of help their habitat and to bring them back. But that's kind of the history of the Cisco, the history of the walleye, which I kind of got into detail with, and the perch. If anyone has any questions on the fishing part of it? Yeah.
I've been told, I'm a saltwater fisherman.
Yeah.
That occasionally you guys get muskies.
That, from my research, muskie used to be pretty prevalent, and from what I've seen on the 3 Mile Bay side, in the little crotch there that is 3 Mile Bay.
There's a little shoal out in front of Hooper's Harbor on 3 Mile, and that's where I heard the guys go out there, very small shoal, and they catch muskies.
Yeah, I haven't seen any recent reports of them, but in the history that I've researched, that's where, in that area is where I've heard them coming out of. Now, I know about 3 years ago there was one caught on Mud Bay, but that's, Mud Bay really
But
is.
they're out in Fox and Grenadier in the summertime.
Yeah, I've heard that too. So inside the bay, I haven't seen one come through the ice. I've actually caught salmon through the ice in the bay,
Yeah.
which is also rare, but we've definitely had some sort of comeback too, with the lake sturgeon. This last year, for instance, we probably iced 6 or 7 sturgeon, and that's highly uncommon. We would go, a year or 2 without catching one, and now this last year we've caught probably 6 or 7 of them. So that's been different, but
Well, I know that the muskies they predominantly go out in the lake in the summer.
yeah, okay,
But you would think that the juvenile muskies,
yeah,
being in Chaumont Bay.
and
is
especially with all the
perfect-
tip-ups out there, they're
perfect
definitely a tip-up.
habitat for-
Yeah. I haven't heard of one being
And
caught.
musk, But you
Yeah.
never catch.
No.
Never catch a
No.
musk, which I don't understand.
And I don't get it either, but that just kind of is what it is.
So how big are the sturgeon that you caught?
The sturgeon that we've caught one this year, I believe it was over 48 inches. So they're pretty big, yeah. And we catch a lot of lake trout too. Come winter time, the lake trout like to come into the bay too. Usually we'll catch them beyond the tip of Point Salubrious when you start getting out to Cherry Island in the deeper water. But they're not uncommon either, and also trophy size. Yes?
Yeah, Louis, I know that during the winter we have northern pike tournaments and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, so the pike, I should have hit on that too, a little bit more detail, but the pike have definitely been seeing an uprising too. Especially this last season, again, we've had a definite uptick in pike catches. And back in the day, it was a very hardcore pike fishery. Before the walleye was popular, people used to crowd the lake and do pike. And then that kind of petered out. I don't know in what period, I would guess somewhere early 90s, where it maybe not completely transitioned, but people started to kind of go after the perch and maybe the walleye a little bit more. And then by the 2000s, it was, kind of a clandestine group of people that knew what it held for trophy walleye. And then, it's hard to keep the cat in the bag when you pull out fish in that size.
There's 3 other fish too that I have personal experience
Yeah.
with in the past. And, it used to be, I lived in 3 Mile Bay for a while. I'm on 3 Mile Point now on the south side. But when I was living in the bay, I swear to God, that bay would be covered with garpike.
Gar, yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
I mean, literally thousands and thousands of
I've heard the same. Back by the isthmus, I heard that they patrol back there a good amount too.
And also, we would skate on the ice in the winter in 3 Mile Bay.
Oh, get out, yeah.
And we would clean off the ice, and oftentimes it would be crystal clear ice, it'd be 3 feet deep or
And you'd
4,
see them right there.
and it would be full of frozen carp.
Really?
You'd stay long and see the carp in the ice.
Really?
And then every spring, they would have a problem, because the dead carp would all wash up in the bay and cover the shoreline, and they'd have to take it to the dump.
I'm sure that wasn't any.
But I haven't seen that kind of carp around.
Now, we have a good carp spawn in Sawmill Bay. And when they are spawning, you can go down there to the docks where the clubs are, and just see them walloping around in there. Like little whales, I mean, big carp. But in the wintertime, we don't catch them. It's kind of funny. We don't catch the drum in the wintertime. We don't really catch the bass. It's kind of, the fishery just kind of changes, And then in the summertime, again, the guys it transitions from a trophy walleye fishery to a trophy bass fishery. So, I mean, we kind of have the best of all worlds.
There was one other fish. too,
Yeah.
That, it was probably 5-6 years ago, not sure how long, a couple hundred feet off my shore. I was with my grandson, and I teach him how to fish, right? And he caught a pickerel. And I haven't seen one of them. That's the first time I saw one in Chaumont Bay, and I haven't seen one since.
Now, they're not a lot in Chaumont proper, but that same area I was just talking about, back by the isthmus, in the, what I call the back bay, is a very popular spot for pickerel. A lot of the charter captains will go back there and catch pickerel. Just to kind of, if the fishing's slow, they want to kind of bend some rods for the guys, and that's typically the place to do it. But yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, the Cisco, it seems like the DEC is promoting conservation and propagation of sturgeon, obvious reasons there.
Yeah.
and Cisco.
Yeah.
Is that because Cisco's a bait fish that's gonna help the rest of the fisheries? Cause it seems like walleye and bass and pike all need.
Now, that's a good question. I think, the main thing is, with a lot of the fish that aren't doing well, is because of the zebra mussel. The invasive zebra mussel and the goby, the zebra mussel, a lot of fish use these small rocky beds to kind of drop their eggs. The zebra mussel has paved over all that. So a lot of the initiative that the DEC has been taking with the Cisco in particular, is they get these big barges of rock, you guys have probably seen them, and they unload them. They're just trying to bring back that habitat to give them a place to spawn. And much like the walleye too, walleye don't protect their nests.
Are these bigger fish eating Cisco?
Well, mainly the goby. So the Cisco are preyed on, but the size, the mature Ciscos are not.
Yeah, they're too big.
So the mature Ciscos are, they'll get out 20 plus inches. The smaller Ciscos in schools will be targeted by game fish, just like the alewife schools are. I don't know to what extent, but the main problem, I think, and the main reason why they're taking action, I think, is because the spawning habitat, the detrimental zebra mussel that kind of killed their habitat. But they're a wonderful fish. They're much like the lake whitefish. The only difference, they're lake herring. And the only difference between the whitefish and the Cisco is one thing. One has a jaw that has kind of an underbite, and the other has an overbite. Other than that, they're identical. That's the only discerning factor, is an overbite and an underbite. So you pull one out of the ice, and a lot of the times you kind of look at it and can scratch your head, but 95% of the time it's Cisco. We have very few whitefish that make their way into the bay. Yeah.
I got more fish.
Sure.
But back in the 70s,
Yeah.
when I was in the bay, there were two fish that would be fished every spring, right? There'd be a time when the shore on both sides of that bay all the way out would be lined with
Bullhead.
banners for bullheads.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that since then, but just a little bit around the crib.
Yeah, no, that has definitely fallen off too. Yeah, but go ahead.
And then the other one was snout. My uncle would come down, because I lived right on the shore here in 3 Mile Bay.
Yeah.
My uncle would come down with his snout nets and literally right
Yeah.
off the bay right here, just scoop up and fill 5-gallon pails.
Well, I believe they were wiped out by the salmon.
Really?
I'm almost positive that led to the smelt got pretty much went extinct because of the
When
salmon.
they started stocking them?
Exactly. Yeah.
But
That's
they
from-
were running up in the bay after a while, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that's what kind of did it to them. The bullhead, I don't know, but I know it used to be very popular. I know I wasn't here at this time, but I know the Cummins had the Mariner, the restaurant there, and I think they did a bullhead every, was it Friday nights or something like that, and it was all you could eat. So, going from an all you can eat to, not that I'm saying they had anything to do with it, but going from all you can eat to hardly being fished probably tells you something. And it probably comes back to the invasive goby and the invasive zebra mussel. They've really done a number.
To stay on the fish thing.
Yeah.
One of the other things was, that Cummings, I don't remember Larry Cummings.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember him, I know less well.
Yeah, well, I remember my younger brother used to work for him, and he would clean bullheads for him, and they would ship them by the,
Yeah.
ton. But he also had tankers that he would net eels,
Eels.
and literally fill tankers full of eels out of Chaumont Bay
Wow.
and ship them to New York City.
Now, I have seen an eel on the ice. I don't know who caught it, but I was just kind of walking along the ice and saw this eel. So I haven't caught one, but I have seen one on the ice. But I didn't know they were in those types of numbers.
They used to net them like crazy and ship them.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. But the bullhead, I would have to, like I said, guess that it was something to do with the zebra mussel or the goby. But they're still out there, and people do still fish them. It's just not as popular. I know Greg Netto from the hardware store, who's passed away, used to always say, when the wind blows out of the west or southwest hard and it muddies up that bay, that's when you fish them down at the boat launch. Yeah.
For the layman, can you elaborate on the terminology of feed bag?
Yeah, feed bag is definitely, it would be a term for when they're aggressively feeding to get through the winter. So they'll use the time in the fall to really gorge and put on a nice body of weight to get them through the winter when food becomes scarce. You know, a lot of the things in the water die, the weeds and things like that, and oxygen rates kind of fall off the map. So it becomes like a wasteland kind of to a fish. So they use that fall period to kind of gorge themselves, and they can kind of get through the winter months a little bit easier. Then they go into a almost lethargic mode where they just
Semi-hibernation state?
almost. Now again, the walleye and perch are known as an active winter species, but to a point, relatively speaking. They do reach a point of lethargy where they kind of have to dumb it down and get their cues to, you know, get through the males will be a little bit more aggressive throughout the winter, but for the most part, the females will kind of, those big, I mean, huge ones that we see that the pictures do well on Facebook with, those ones get a little bit more lethargic and they become a little bit more finicky, but the males do maintain that activeness considerably more than the females. But that feedback term is just essentially, you know, putting on a healthy diet to get through the winter months.
We've been coming up since the sixties, and until, I guess it was the seventies, Wilson Bay, it was covered with alewives. What is the status with alewives?
The alewives, in my opinion, are still thriving. And, you know, in the bay, when we begin fishing for the fall walleye, we'll be cruising down, you know, coming down the chute, as I call it, coming down like in between Cherry Island and Point Peninsula, and all the way out to the tip there, kind of in that chuteway, kind of coming into the bay. And just from, you know, maybe a mile troll, you'll mark on your graph, you know, 4 or 5 huge bait balls, which are alewives. So in my opinion, from what I see, and to be honest, when you're fishing and you see all that bait, it typically doesn't make for good fishing, because it's kind of counterintuitive, you know, you think, oh, there's the bait, the fish must be here. Well, there's all this bait around. It's like having a McDonald's where there's 10 other McDonald's. You know, you're not gonna do as well as if there was just, you know, you and maybe one other guy.
So
but-
multiple fish feed on the alewives?
Yeah, all of our game fish will feed on the alewives in one capacity or another. The salmonoid fish, which are the lake trout and the salmon species, will feed on them the most. The walleye definitely feed on them a lot too, but I would say the salmonoids would be first and foremost on their list.
And what's the largest that an alewife will get?
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, like a perch?
No, a little bit slightly smaller than your average perch at full, you know, adulthood. Yeah.
Are cormorant an issue for you?
They are, but not as bad. I don't think. Of course, I haven't been here from. I know they had their heyday when kind of local captains took up arms against them. But I don't think they're as big of an issue. Although they do wreak havoc in general, relatively speaking, because their whole food source is fish eggs. Not their whole food source, but their dominant source of food is diving in the water, finding a bed of eggs, and attacking it. And the main reason why we have this closed season for the bass fishing, we don't have, legally, you cannot catch and release smallmouth or largemouth bass before June 15th. And that's because the gobies will literally surround, those nests out there right now that they've made are all of them literally surrounded by gobies. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I have an underwater drone and I've seen it. There are gobies in a ring around these beds. And if that bass gets yanked off the bed by a fisherman, they go in there like piranhas. They're just waiting for that bass to make any move. So that's why we have a very strict no catch and release bass. People do it, and they don't realize they're ruining their own fishery. And you know, I know a lot of local residents, myself included, aren't happy when we see it going on, because there's no mistaking it. They're in a bass boat, they're 20 feet from shore throwing bass rods and bass baits, and you know, you'll yell out to them, "Oh, I'm fishing for walleye."
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's usually, you know, I'm not going to say it's all out of towners, because I myself was an out of towner at one point, but typically the locals know better, because you're kind of ruining your own sport when you're doing that. But you know, it's kind of painful to see it when you do see it, because you know what's going on. You know, as soon as that guy connects, there goes your future crop, you know. And the gobies, there's a double-edged sword, because the reason we have these such large fish are because of the easy baits they have. The gobies are easy money for them. So the bass pick them off at adulthood at will. And that's why we have these records being set. But double-edged sword, the walleye don't protect their beds. Now their spawning habitat is kind of knocked off by the zebra mussel, kind of paving over their habitat. And now where they do have left to lay, you gotta compete with the gobies. So we have an issue with the walleye reproduction, and I think the core to fixing it is to get more habitat out there, because to have any type of impact on the walleye population via stocking on Lake Ontario, the size of Lake Ontario, the DEC estimates you would need 1 million fry to have an impact. The state allocation is 700,000, and not one of it goes to Lake Ontario.
Oh my goodness.
So all of those walleye are already allocated, and it's 300,000 less than what would even make a difference. So the spawning, the stocking idea is, and to stock that many walleye, the price tag of that is literally in the millions. To get those fish to finger length maturity and release them, be a few $1 million. And who knows? Walleye disappear. Not that they're being caught. We don't have a problem with people overfishing them with rod and reel or netting them. They would, you know, kind of do their thing, and they're just a finicky fish in general. So you may not see any results that way. If you just released 1 million of them once, you know, you have to really replenish their natural way of reproducing, which obviously isn't an easy task either.
Do you see the goby population stabilize?
I haven't seen a change in it. I mean, in the wintertime, it's funny because we don't see them in the bay, we don't catch them on hooks. In the summertime, you troll around there with a worm on your hook or on the St. Lawrence, you can't keep them off. You have to periodically check to make sure you're not dragging around a goby for 45 minutes. But in the summertime, you know, and it's embarrassing as a guide, and you pull it up, you go, oh, okay, we were pulling around a goby. But that's just part of the nature of the business. But I haven't seen any increase or decrease in the population. There's nothing that I think would ever neutralize them now. The DEC, they don't want you putting them back. If you catch one, you're supposed to, you know, either end them or get them out of the lake in some capacity. But they're fattening up. Our fish that are mature are huge. It's just that the next generation of fish may not be there at all. Well, I don't say at all, but, you know, it's detrimental.
The perch like them too.
The perch like them too. All of everything we have here, it's trophy caliber. It's from our walleye to our perch to our bass to our pike to our lakers, and a lot of it revolves around the goby. Obviously other bait fish too, but the goby's definitely been a gift and a curse.
Have you had any run-in with catfish? That's what I target, the big catfish.
Yeah, we usually catch a few out in the channel, alongside past Salubrious, alongside Cherry there in the channel. But I don't have too many run-ins with them. I've caught one through the ice, and I've caught a handful trolling.
I get most of mine over the Black River.
Yeah, back in the marsh there and stuff.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get a lot over there.
Yeah, I know a lot are caught back
They're a
there.
lot of fun to catch.
I know they are.
So our fishing derby is basically dependent on northern pike.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about northern pike?
Well,
I mean, you never hear talk of northern pike in the
well, they
summer.
took a back seat. When the walleye became popular, the pike took a back seat. And especially with the bass becoming more popular too, they kind of play second fiddle to both species. And again, going back to the days where, you know, you'd see, before it was a big walleye craze up here, people came out just solely to fish for pike. And that's where your tip-up fishing and your large minnows and all that deployment came in. But now it's just the people kind of want the walleyes, and they want primarily the walleye and the bass and the perch. The pike are definitely, some people still are targeting them. It just pales in comparison to the past.
Well,
Their
we have-
population though is healthy, and I've noticed it in the last 3 or 4 years, it getting better and better. And I don't know if that's because there's less pressure on them, but they're definitely healthy. I'd say they're probably one of the healthier species in the bay, in the lake, and the bay.
But they're not, I don't know that much about fishing, so.
That's okay.
But, you know, I've been involved in the fire department's fishing
Sure.
derbies forever. But you never hear talk about fishing for northern pike
I know
in the summertime.
Right, not much in the winter either. They are around, and again, it's just that they've taken the back seat. Everyone wants their trophy walleye, their picture with the big one, you know? Pike, synonymously, for many anglers that I know and abroad, they're just, you know, they see the pike and it's like, oh, it's a pike. You know, they've kind of stigmatized them as, and they're great eating. They're
are.
just, they're hard to clean. So people, if they're not familiar with cleaning them, it's just, you know, they don't want to deal with them. They're slimy. Obviously a lot of fish are slimy, but they have a particular slime to them and they're smelly. And they thrash, and they have razor sharp teeth.
Yeah.
So everything about them when they get close to the boat makes you like, oh no, not like that. It's like anything else. Yes.
Yeah, in all your catches, have you ever noticed the effect of the lamprey?
We've seen, I've never caught a fish that actively had a lamprey, but we've definitely caught an abundance of fish with the lamprey scar. But never with one intact. I would say it's relatively low, those that do have the scar, probably around the 5 to 10 percentile. But there's definitely evidence of them, yeah.
I do know that our government and the Canadian government work together on doing something in the streams to
Yeah,
eliminate them.
they tried to. During COVID, they had a period where they weren't doing that program. So that obviously wasn't, you know, helpful. But I know they were trying to keep them at bay through numerous programs where they kind of entered the system, and they almost have dams set up for them. But I know that program shut down for at least a year or two, and I haven't seen any direct results of it shutting down, but I know they do their best to keep them at bay, and it's probably for a reason.
Louis?
The International Marine Sanctuary Project, does that, I mean, I know what it does to help preserve like the
The shipwrecks, is that what
the
we're talking about?
shipwrecks and things like that, but does it have any connection with preservation of the species or anything?
I don't think so directly. There may be some indirect results because they kind of want you to stay away, and I think they're going to kind of buoy them off where they don't want you even dragging baits by them in a sense, maybe. But I don't think it would be much of an impact, no.
Okay.
I was gonna ask, are there any species that you have concerns about the health of?
You know, all in all, no. In general, no. Because the lake is a big place, and just like anything else, everything goes in cycles. There definitely has to be things done so we can maintain. I don't see any dire straits for any one particular species, but I think we definitely have to pay close attention. And I think the efforts made for the reintroduction of spawning habitat is going to be crucial. Like I said before, we can't go about a stocking route, it's just not feasible. So I think we definitely have to pay close attention, but I think if it's managed correctly, the walleye fishing, in my opinion, hasn't changed much. It's always tough, you know, you're always out there, it's trophy fishing. You know, like I said earlier, again, we don't have too many smaller walleyes, which obviously isn't a great thing, but the rate at which we catch the big ones, I don't see really changing that much. It's always, you know, you put your time in for them. And the same thing with all the other species, I would have to bundle that in with the reproduction aspect. I think all species are going to be affected, but I think the DEC paying attention to it and introducing these programs will kind of help to keep in line with the harm that's been done by the mussels. But I don't see anything that's in dire straits right now. I think we have pretty robust populations, but we definitely have to keep an eye on it. Yeah,
Three questions. Do you need a water? I don't know if they
Yeah.
have any.
definitely. Anyone have a water?
I saw everybody with the little water bottles. I don't have one.
Oh, there
I'll
we
grab,
go.
I know where they're at. Anyone else need one? No? All right.
I don't need a water.
Oh, no, just me. You read the room correctly.
Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from West Pittston, Pennsylvania. I was actually born in the town of Old Forge, Pennsylvania. And my family was in the coal mining business. We still are. It's obviously a tradition there, not a tradition, but it kind of built the valley that I live in, the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre Valley. But I came up here about 10 years ago fishing and fell in love with it and never left.
Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed a lot of people from Pennsylvania are up here.
Yeah, definitely.
I go
Definitely.
down there to fish the flatheads, they come up here to fish the walleye.
Right, right. No, definitely get a lot of people from Pennsylvania in the wintertime too.
And to that point, Louis, I'd like to say a couple of words.
Sure.
Louis and I met probably 7 years ago, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and he's done no self-promotion here for himself, he does more than charters. Louis is a real asset to our
Oh,
community,
well, thank you.
a real asset to our community. And if you follow him on Facebook, he is Chaumont Masters. And Louis is a good asset in that he tells people when it's safe to go on the ice, or when it's not safe to go on the ice, where to go and where not to go. And I've been here for 75 years, and he knows more about this community than I do.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
I have an unpaid promo.
Okay.
My financial advisor from Syracuse has a son who loved fishing. At age 10, he decided he's gonna make his own lures. Okay, he just finished his first year of college. He has a huge business. He makes all hand-painted lures, and it's called Real Cool
Oh, I'm familiar.
Lures.
Yes.
And it's REEL. They have some small ones in the Chaumont
I
Harbor.
have some of his stuff,
You
yes.
do.
Mhm.
You have any of the big stuff for lake? Because he's
I
got.
have trolling stuff of his, yeah.
Right, right. So he has a Facebook page, and he's got a website.
He's in college now?
Yeah, he's
Wow.
like on honor roll.
Good for him.
So he had the whole family out there.
Good for him.
Hey, all these, I hear about it all the time. And an honor student.
Yeah, the last time I saw him, I mean, he was probably in middle school or high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so
Well, good.
support a college kid.
Yes. Real cool lures.
Yeah.
Boo just wanted to, Boo
Yeah.
had a question
Well,
here.
I have two actually.
Sure.
One, the little fish that we used to catch when we were kids, sunfish and rock bass. And also, what could we do, if anything, to help if we live out there? Is there anything that we could do as well?
As far as just in general?
Throw gravel in the lake on that?
You know, that's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, obviously, what I like to do, just small things, if I see any garbage or anything like that, it goes without saying. But to help the fishery, you know, donations to the DEC, they're always, like any other government organization, they're always cash strapped. They also look for volunteers to donate time. But other than that, it's tough because, you know, the problems that we face, you know, are along the lines of the goby and the mussels, which are our core issues. They really can't be quelled. They can only kind of be attended to via the introduction of the new habitat. So as much as we'd like to be able to do something with our own two hands, it's tough. But the rock bass are still out there in pretty good numbers, and somewhat sunfish too.
Crappie.
Crappie, to be honest with you, in Chaumont proper, I've never caught one.
Really?
I've caught them in Sawmill Bay.
Oh, there's some big black crappies.
I've caught them in Sawmill, I've caught them in 1 or 2 and 3 mile, but out on the shoals on Chaumont proper, I've never caught one.
Chaumont River, there's a lot of
Yeah, I've run into them on the river too.
There used to be schools of minnows too, off the docks, and they seem to have disappeared.
I've kind of noticed that too, although I do still see them time to time, just maybe not as prevalent.
How about the water depth? Have you noticed how that's high this year? Is that effective?
I don't think it has too much of an effect on it, although I've read some studies where with the pike in particular and their spawning habitat, that it was a little bit more impactful to them. I don't know exactly in what regard, I can't recollect it accurately enough, but I don't think there's too much of an issue there. But obviously there is a big fluctuation. I mean, we've all seen it. The shoreline, what used to be shoreline is now water. Yeah.
We used to spare suckers in all the creeks too.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that anymore. I'm not
No,
sure.
They would run every.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still run right by my house there, but it's like April for like 5 days and then it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't spare them anymore.
Right.
I used to love it.
Did anyone learn anything from the history part?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm curious about the gar pike. They go by my house all the time on Independence Point.
Okay.
Are they pike and are they sport fish?
That's a good question. I couldn't really say. I think actually they're a hybrid, but I'm not certain on that. To give you a truthful answer on it, I couldn't say. But we have caught them. They're just they're not rare as far as their numbers in the bay, but they don't like to bite lures for some reason.
Do they give you a fight if they do?
They do, yeah. And I've heard of them actually being caught with a decoy, not even a lure with a hook, and then they'll have a mess of line, and they'll kind of become ensnared because they have really small and strong beaks, and it's hard to get a hook into them. So they'll have a decoy and then kind of like a rat's nest. And they'll bite and then
They use yarn a lot.
yarn, yeah, and then they'll bite and they'll kind of try to induce not a snagging with the hook, an ensnarement, I guess would be the better word. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the Cisco's will ever make it into the river.
Into the river? That's a good question, but
Always Chaumont. It's
Oh,
here,
into-
but
that's a good question, but I definitely have seen them on the uprising. Back when I first started fishing here, we would catch close to none. Now we catch them in numbers. I mean, not, on a daily, but it's no surprise to catch them anymore. So I think they're definitely, whatever the DEC has been doing for them has been working. I can definitively say that one. Yeah,
Well, thank you.
my pleasure.
For any of you that are interested, I would like to ask Louis to touch on one other topic, and that is the property where he actually lives now. Because unless you know him as a neighbor, you may not be aware of it, and it's an area that's of great historic interest to the people of this area.
Okay,
So
so
if you would
we'll
tell
touch
us
on that,
a
sure.
little bit about that.
So, for anyone that doesn't know where I live, I'm about halfway up Point Salubrious on the Chaumont side. It used to be the residence of the Clark family and the site of the old Warner Springs Hotel, the Point Salubrious Club, and the history there is a man named Ava Warner found a mineral spring, and he sent the water to the state of New York and the health department, and they wrote back saying that wrote the letter saying, we believe this water to be cathartic and that it can treat topical skin issues, this and that. Well, the State Department of Health wrote back and said, yes, it is. So he then built the Mineral Springs Hotel on that site next door to my house. And fast forward a little through history, at one point they actually bottled the water and shipped it as far west as Wisconsin. But people would come into the hotel and all the rooms had a bathtub, and it brought this water from the mineral spring, and you would bathe in one of these bathtubs because it was cathartic. And at one point, I guess it had ran its course, and the home was actually bought by a local dry goods tycoon named W.H. Moore, who had a dry goods store in the town of Watertown. And ironically enough, Moore employed two gentlemen in their youth. One was F.M. Kirby, and the other was Frank Woolworth. So what he recognized that Woolworth had a knack for organizing the store correctly in a sense of psychology, what the people would want to buy when they were close to the register or here or there. And he let him go with it, and he would put together these tables just like this, and everything on this table was a nickel. Everything on this table is a dime. So, which eventually spawned the five and dime. Woolworth and Kirby ran off with the idea, and they were in need of funding, and they couldn't get it. Their idea just kind of wasn't holding water to either their family or banks. Moore came back and advanced them the money that they needed to start the five and dime. Well, how this ties into the property there is Mr. Moore bought the Warner Springs Hotel, and it was a residence owned by him for many years, and he turned it over to the Trinity Church and turned it into a boys club for trouble, or a boys and girls club for troubled youths. And they'd come up there and they'd spend the summer, but it was all these properties were owned by W.H. Moore, who had given a start in business to F.M. Kirby and Woolworth, who later started the five and dime together.
Awesome.
So a little bit more history there on Point Salubrious.
And it all started by what we refer to by holding our nose and saying sulfur water.
Yeah, right. That's sulfur water, exactly. And to be honest, that same mineral spring that they pumped out of to fill those bathtubs, I get water to my house from. Yeah.
Do you drink it?
I don't drink it.
No.
I'm not that brave, but it's all there.
I'd like to thank Louis for doing this program for us today. I think it was a great success, and we've convinced him we're a friendly crowd.
You definitely did. I'm glad I did it. I was a little bit nervous, but I had a lot of the history, I won't say on my hip, so I was kind of eager to kind of put the first part in there because I had known it relatively well. And I know a lot of you guys probably know most of the history that I touched on, but it's some pretty interesting stuff, and at the very least, it can be relived.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yes.